Welcome to Alaskan Man Adventures. This episode's on how to smoke salmon for canning. This episode's sponsored by Sitka Wildlife Tours. Now, if you enjoy this video, make sure you hit the subscribe button. Don't forget to check out my other videos, and I hope to see you sometime soon in Alaska. Remember, it's very important to descale and deslime your salmon before you start your processing. If you don't know that technique, check out my desliming and descaling video, and that'll teach you all the tricks on how to do that right and very easily.
Okay, I'm going to start by adding fish to my brine. This is a very simple brine of basically a half gallon of water and 1 cup of sea salt. I use sea salt because that's what these fish came from, the ocean, and it's just that perfect flavor. I've just really learned to love that. If you're going to use other types of salt, make sure you never use iodine salt, never. The fish are full of iodine already, and when you add iodine salt to it, you can actually overdose yourself on iodine. So don't do that. Salmon are already a good natural source of iodine. Now, I made sure my brine was good and mixed up. I always keep an extra spatula ready to go, and I mix it up. And then as I'm cleaning the fish, I start throwing them into the brine. I make sure that each fillet section is separated, so it is not clumsy here. And then my table, I'm going to keep it clean. So I'm coming right back for a hose down. Every time between each one I cut, I clean it up again. And that way I'm always slime free and scale free and all that as I go. As I'm doing my next fillet, the first one is already sitting in the salt. Now I'm going to make a half smoked version of jarred salmon. So that means I'm only smoking it halfway through, and then I'm going to be placing these in jars and adding other wonderful things for flavor. And I'll explain that in my other videos on making brines into different kinds. And there's so many kinds, and I recommend trying different flavors. Find one that you may get from me that you like, and then start with that, and then work on throwing a jalapeno in there for a little heat if you like heat. Or other flavors just turn out really good. And I'll give you my top 3 versions in my videos, but feel free to experiment and try. That's how I've learned different things throughout the years that I like better than others, and I tend to go a little more low salt now than before. And I know a cup of salt sounds like a lot of salt to put in your brine, but I'm not going to leave this fish in the brine very long at all. And that's because I'm doing the half smoke. Other versions, you might leave it in there for 24 hours or more, but on a half smoke, I only need about 20 minutes or so in the brine. About the time I'm done filling this bucket with fish, and then do the second bucket, I'll pull the first bucket and rinse it and get it ready for the rack. Okay, I've got a couple of fish cut up now. I've put them into the brine solution, which was 1 cup of sea salt for a half a gallon of water, and that was good, clean filtered water. If you take a look here, I've been stirring up the pieces. See what it looks like. Now, this is my second bucket, so by the time I was done with this one, we can now put fish onto the racks. Okay, we're on the home stretch. My brined fish is ready to be put onto racks, but I must prepare my racks first. This is my smoker. I know it's a really big one, but as much fish as we process, I can do about 10 salmon at a time, so it was important to have the size for me. But whatever size smoker you have, you just got to prep it for what you have. Now on mine, I like the thinner pieces of meat, and I've got a lot of rack space, so I can do that. But to keep the meat from sticking, it's most important that we put a little bit of oil on it first. What I've got here is a little paint roller used at True Value, and I've used it many times. You can change the rollers when they get too dirty. But I've just taken olive oil, put it in a little paint tray, and I rub all over the racks. I go that way and the opposite way, because the stainless steel chicken wire I have on here needs a coating of oil just to keep things coming off real easy on the other end when you're done smoking. Now, whatever you do, please never use galvanized or zinc wire racks. That is poison and it will kill your family and yourself. So please don't ever use anything but stainless or plain steel on your smoker racks. Very important. Okay, now that my fish is brined, I use one of my racks as a draining rack for in my sink here. And so you can see this batch, there's about 2.5, almost 3 fish in there. It's been soaking for probably 35-40 minutes. It's taken me a while to trim the other, or to cut up the other pieces in the other bucket, but I run 2 buckets. As soon as I'm done with 1 bucket, I put it on ice. After cutting the fish and setting in the bucket, by the time I'm done with 2 bucket loads, which is about 5 salmon or so, it's about the right time for the soak time for 1 cup of salt to 1/2 gallon of water. Now I'm half smoking this salmon. That's why I'm not soaking it for 24 hours in the salt brine. But you'll notice I'm also just letting the water drain off on its own. So remember, there was very little slime, very little scales in my mix because I cleaned it with the vinegar first and washed them well. And now this salmon just kind of damp drying. And look at how it's got kind of a shine on it. And that's partly salt water, but I'm gonna put this right on the racks and it's gonna air dry for an hour or so before I start smoking. And that's gonna bring that salt sheen right to the top, and it'll be just the right amount of salt. It took me a while to figure this out. If I soaked it for 10 hours, it'd be too salty in my jars. You know, how long you soak the fish each time depends on what you're doing. I'm doing a half smoke on this and then jarring it, and so I don't need a really intense flavor, or it doesn't need to be stored after I'm done, like you would a jerky type salmon. And so I'll be teaching different types of salmon, but for this one here, it only needed about 20 to 30 minutes in the brine, and then it's ready to go. And I'm not rinsing this batch like I do with most brines I use. And that's because there was so little salt time. That gives it a little more time as it's dripping and drying, which will turn out perfect on my half-smoked salmon. Now that the salmon's had a moment to drip dry, I just start lining it up on my racks. And in this batch, I've got a mixture of silver and sockeye. So I think I'm just going to work on the sockeye first and keep them kind of separated. I also go by size. Okay, I'm filling the rack, so this one's going to be sockeye on this one, and I'm kind of putting the thicker ones towards the middle. Makes it a little easier to make sure it smokes well. I sometimes do racks completely separate, like big fatty ones will be on one rack, small ones on another, and that just makes it easier when you're rotating them in the middle of the night or anything like that. Now with this half smoked salmon, it's not so crucial because I'm not going to finish this till it's drier and perfect, ready to eat. This is only going to get smoked halfway, and then it's going to be finished cooked in the jars when I jar it. Jarring it allows me to save it for a longer period of time. It's a great item to have on your four-wheeler or in your boat with you, and you can have a lunch anywhere in some gorgeous place, and it's just nothing more special than eating your own salmon sitting on a four-wheeler on the beach in the middle of nowhere. Okay, my sockeye rack is done. Isn't that pretty? That's like candy. Now I'm going to put it in the smoker to air dry. I'm going to put a fan on. Not only keeps the bugs off, but it also gives me a nice little skin on it. Rack number 2 is done. This one's all silver. The silver salmon, also known as a coho. Meets a little more orange than that. Now it's ready for some air drying. You can see the fan going in there. I know this looks like quite a clutter. I've got a radio underneath that plastic there. I have fans on the walls. And I use a Traeger grill for my smoker. So I've got a great big Traeger in there. It's a pellet-fired grill. And I'm burning nothing but alder. Salmon deserves nothing but alder.
Alder is always the wood of choice for smoking salmon in Alaska. It leaves a nice, sweet smoke flavor. My smoker's 8 feet tall, 8 feet wide, 4 feet deep. And with the Traeger grill, you have lots of control over the amount of smoke and the amount of heat through the whole process. It takes many hours and lots of patience to process salmon like this, but the end result is always worth it. With the price of salmon today, each jar is like gold to us. It's a treat you won't soon forget.
Number 7. When I built this smoker, I never intended to make it so big. It started off as a cover to go around my grill and for wintertime cooking. Because this grill smokes fish so well, I thought, maybe I can build my smokehouse around it. So it's my heat source and the fire source and the smoke source for the smoked salmon racks here. Now I'm ready to turn the stove on, or the barbecue on. Make sure it's loaded. And so I just click the first setting, which is smoke, which is only going to bring the internal temperature on that grill to about 140. And since I've got the lid open and in a much bigger space, it's going to produce a lot of smoke without a lot of heat. So I'm going to be kind of cold smoking these fish for the first couple hours. And then the last couple of, probably last 3 hours after that, I'm going to ramp the temperature up once per hour and try to gel some of the fat inside that meat before it comes off and then becomes jarred fish. Now, as for a jarred recipe, I'd be smoking it a lot longer if it was going to be for a finished product recipe. So anyway, smoker's on, turning the fan off. Okay, I'm working on my next rack of silver salmon, and I think I'm going to pick all the big ones. The silvers were bigger than the sockeye, so I'm going to take the bigger meat first and just do a rack and nothing but the bigger, thicker cuts. And that'll make smoking a lot easier for rotating and all that kind of stuff. Now, if I was going to finish this all the way to the end, that would be even more important. You see how the fat layer is right on top there? For a finished product, that's kind of ugly, so if you flip it over, it's a little less fat. Little tricks like that will make your product look really good in the end. A lot of my salmon is made for friends and family. I've got a grandma that just loves eating perfectly made salmon, so I work hard to make sure I can spread the wealth around. Thank you, Alaska, for supplying our needs. Right there. Beautiful. Nothing's gonna be trickier. Rack number 9. Wow. The first part of this is just to get a light smoke on the meat. And then that gives it this nice smoky flavor I'm looking for. And then I slowly ramp the temperature up each hour to try to gel and solidify the fats that are inside the salmon. If you don't, they'll boil out of the meat when you put them in the jars and cook them. And the same process is going on if you're going to finish smoke your salmon also. You're slowly bringing it up to temperature so the fat doesn't boil out and make this white goo all over your salmon. It still tastes good, but the more fat you can keep in the meat, the richer it will taste, the better the texture, and the better the flavor. Just tips that'll help. As you can see, my smoker's smoking up a storm. I've come out to turn the heat up a little bit on it. It's been about 2 hours now on the smoke setting. And you'll notice when I open my door, there's a kind of a screen hanging down. It keeps the smoke over on that side. You can see how well it's concentrating there. It's just part of how I designed it. All of the fish are on the racks right there. And I'm gonna sneak underneath here and turn the temperature up. See it's showing 130 down there. I'm gonna turn it up one setting. And I'm gonna put a temperature gauge up on the racks up here, and that'll tell me where we're at as we go on this. Give me a good idea where the salmon are throughout the process. Right now it's about putting the skin, kind of the tactile skin on it, and also just slowly bringing it up to temperature so it doesn't boil the fat out. Okay, it's time to ramp the salmon temperature up again. I've done that already twice, so this is slowly congealing that fat into the salmon. You can see smoke still coming out of the smoker up there. When I open the doors, you'll see lots. Even though I've on a higher heat, it's still smoking the fish as it's cooking it. Now we haven't even hit 140 up here, which we're gonna hit on probably the next setting, I'm hoping. I'm gonna click it up one more time. And we'll go about another half hour, 45 minutes. And then I'll probably click it up one more time after that. By slowly ramping the salmon up, that'll keep that fat from breaking out of the meat and ruining your fish load. Well, it's been about 5 hours since we started smoking the fish and should be ready now. It's starting to get a little dark out, so pardon the light. I turned the smoker off about a half hour ago and left the fan running just to cool things down. And you can get a look at what we've produced here. You know, it's dry, but still very tender inside. And so now this will go into jars and be jarred tomorrow. So we're going to place it on trays now and get it ready for tomorrow. You can see it hanging over there. 10 racks of salmon. I just using some cookie sheets with a little paper towel lid on there, and I just carefully pull these off. Most of the time they come off pretty easy. Remember, I olive oiled the racks ahead of time. Sure is pretty stuff, even just like this. Now they're very close, you know, within a few hours of being finished to just be able to eat it. But right now it's fairly tender. You can kind of see how tender the meat is there, because we're going to finish cooking that in the jar. You don't want to overdo it. You overdo it and then cook it in the jar, it gets very dark and it can be very dry. It's one of the secrets to my salmon being more tender is the fact that I don't overcook it ahead of time. Rack number 2. This one looks like sockeye. It's really dark red. Isn't that pretty? Pretty stuff. I've always found sockeye to be a little drier than the silver or the king, so it's never been my super favorite, but it is a beautiful fish. Very beautiful to look at. This one's silver again. Just tell by it not being as red. Look at these two trays side by side. You can see the difference in the color. That's the difference between a silver and a sockeye. Rack number 4. Pretty, 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 pretty. And I'm gonna put a layer of paper towel in between here. That'll help stabilize the height of this. I'm going to be stacking this fish up pretty high. We got quite a smoker load today.
The paper towels I use in between the stacks of fish not only stabilizes the stack as it grows, but it also absorbs moisture when I put these trays in the refrigerator overnight. What a long day it's been. I started at 8 o'clock this morning, and it's past 8 o'clock now, and I'm still processing salmon. So be prepared for the long haul, but boy is it worth it.
Last rack of the night. Oh, came out beautiful. Well, we're at the end of the night. We've ended up with 3 trays of salmon ready to be jarred. So we're going to put this in the fridge overnight tonight, cool it down, and then tomorrow we'll jar them up. We'll do another video on that so you can see how we're doing that process. And boy, what a beautiful load of salmon.
Thank you for watching Alaskan Man Adventures. If this video was helpful to you, please hit the subscribe button and the like button. And I really do hope to see you sometime soon in Alaska.